Hi, my name is Peter Doherty. I'm with Princeton University Press. I'm here with Professor Andrew Delbanco of Columbia University, author of a new Princeton University Press book called College, What It Is, What It Was, Is, and Should Be. Andy, can you tell us what your book is about?
This book is about an institution that lots of people think they know well, but I have this feeling that they could stand to know it better. That is, why it's important to our society and why it's in jeopardy. People have a pretty good idea of some of the reasons it's in jeopardy in the sense of how expensive it is to send a child to college these days. But I think they have a less good idea about what's happening to the faculty in our colleges as it becomes less and less of a full-time faculty and more of an adjunct or casual employment faculty. And I think they're not so aware of the tremendous pressures that are on our colleges to prepare people narrowly for this or that career and to sort of give up on the idea that's always been central to the American college, which is that it's a place where young people have the opportunity to discover themselves and discover their passions and what they care about in life, even if those are not necessarily things they're going to do to earn a living. But to enlarge the imagination, I think, is what the American college has been really good at, and I think we would all be much the poorer for it if we lose these institutions.
Okay, there are lots of books about college, and lots of books that argue for the value of a college education. What is distinctive about yours?
Well, one thing distinctive about it, I like to think, is that it makes the argument in the form of a story. That is, it's been my effort to tell the story of where America's colleges came from and how they evolved in the course of the centuries and how they've retained their distinctiveness in the face of the rise of research universities, which sometimes contain colleges within them. And what are the challenges that they face today? Who are the people who get to go to colleges? When did they open up to women and minorities? What are the challenges facing us now to keep the doors open to students from low-income families? These are questions that are often discussed, but I like to think that this is a book that a person can actually read in a fairly short period of time and get a sense of the beginning, middle, and we hope not the end of the story.
In the first chapter of your book, you lay out a series of arguments for the traditional liberal arts college education. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. The first argument is the most familiar because everybody's making it these days, which is that we need more people to get post-secondary degrees, either associate's degrees or bachelor degrees, because we need a more economically competitive population. People with the skills that are necessary in today's increasingly global knowledge economy. And that's a good argument, and it's certainly true. And there's a case to be made that American dominance in the middle of the 20th century, in the later years of the 20th century, correlates very well with our success in opening the doors of higher education to our population. But it's not the only argument. The second argument, which you hear less often, though you hear a little bit nowadays from the current administration, I'm happy to say, is that we need an educated population if we're going to have a functioning democracy. We need citizens who can tell the difference between a demagogue and somebody who's actually trying seriously to address the issues that confront us. We need citizens who can tell the difference between a groundless opinion and an argument based on evidence. And we need citizens with a little bit of a sense of history. Where did our country come from? What are its democratic institutions all about? And what was the cost of achieving them? And what's the cost of protecting them? So that's not a new argument. Thomas Jefferson was making it a long time ago, but it's one that we need to be reminded of and that I fear we may be losing sight of. The third argument, which is the one you hear least often, is that, as a colleague and friend of mine puts it, the best reason to go to college is because if you lead a long life, which we all hope we all will, the inside of your head needs to be an interesting place to live. You don't want to get bored with yourself or with the world. You want to have an imagination that is curious. You want to have some exposure not only to science but also to the arts and to ideas. Now this may be an ideal that we feel we don't have the time for, and people under a lot of economic stress may feel is a luxury. But I really think that's a dangerous path to go down, and it's been one of the glories of our educational system that we believe in this country that everybody should have the opportunity for such an education, to be surprised by something, to be surprised by their own capacities and curiosities. So our colleges have done a pretty good job of that over the centuries, and I hope they'll continue to.
Do you feel that college education properly construed is becoming a preserve for the wealthy?
Well, the numbers are pretty clear, and the implication of the numbers is pretty clear. Your chances of getting a college degree in this country are vastly greater if you come from a family with means than if you come from a family that's struggling to pay the bills. That's intuitively perhaps not so surprising, but if we're serious about this as a nation of opportunity, of equal opportunity, we need to be very concerned about this. And I think we're not sufficiently, and I think the problem goes all the way from the elites, the wealthiest institutions, which in my view should be doing a better job of keeping their doors open to low-income students, all the way down, and again, I don't love the from the top to the bottom kind of terminology, but that's the way we tend to think of these things, to the community colleges, which are arguably the most important post-secondary institutions in our country, where there are many passionate and wonderful teachers and many students hungry for learning, but they're woefully underfinanced, they're overcrowded, and we're making much too low an investment in those institutions.
I've heard you describe the American college experience as being as uniquely American as baseball, jazz, and the 30-year mortgage. I'm curious to know what an observer from outside the United States makes of the American college. Is it an exportable product? Does it have influence around the world?
Well, it's a great question, and you know, initially I think people are surprised and a little puzzled, because what's unique about it is that it exists to give young people that opportunity between adolescence and adulthood to reflect and discover themselves. And in many other societies, the assumption is they should have figured that out by the time they're in their later teens, and there's something wrong with them if they haven't. That's never been true in America. When my favorite writer, Herman Melville, said a whale ship was my Yale College and my Harvard, he never went to college. He managed pretty well without it. What he meant was these were the places where he discovered himself, where where his mind was open to the complexity of the world, natural world and human world. And so I think people from other societies are surprised about that we still cling to this idea. It's a very American idea that people should have a chance to decide who they are. They shouldn't be told at an early stage of life who they are, that they should get the opportunity to reinvent themselves if they don't like who they are or what they've been told they are. As for its exportability, I think one of the interesting phenomena at the moment is that as we're kind of pulling back from this ideal in our own country and moving more in the direction of technical and vocational education, some of the rising societies on the other side of the world, in Asia, for instance, China in particular, are getting very interested in the American model of undergraduate education and are thinking that, in fact, you know, we've been doing something right. We've been creating people with imagination and flexibility and the ability to move across intellectual boundaries, maybe better than they have. But we don't want to export it and lose it at home.
We do a lot of importing of students.
We do indeed, and that's an interesting problem. I mean, all our universities and colleges are proclaiming their wish to become more international, and who can be against that in the world as it's globalizing? At the same time, the truth is they love these international students because they generally pay higher tuition bills. And the real problem, of course, is if they're taking up spaces that ought to be going to American students. And there's no magic formula for that. But it's a problem that we should be aware of, and we should get it right.
What you're describing is on its face, a wonderful institution, the traditional American college education. But I get the sense that you're arguing with someone. Who are you arguing with if you were arguing against?
That's another great question. There's a lot of very high anxiety commentary out there about our colleges, and there's a lot of trashing of our colleges about how students aren't learning enough, how they cost too much, and there's some truth in all of those concerns, and I don't mean to trivialize them or just wave them away, but we seem to be missing in the process what's right about our colleges, and there's a lot right about them, and I've led a sheltered provincial life, mostly in the Northeast and mostly in New York City. But I've gotten around the country, I'm happy to say, pretty widely in recent years. And it's remarkable. I mean, communities everywhere, north, south, east, and west, small towns, big cities, medium-sized cities, you discover terrific institutions filled with terrifically devoted faculty and terrifically bright students. We don't want to underestimate those institutions, even as we are trying to improve them.
Right. This book is intended for a broad audience. That audience would include the stakeholders in college education, administrators, faculty members, trustees, but also students. Can you tell me why you think this book will have value for students?
Well, I think it always helps to reflect on why one is doing what one is doing. And, late adolescents have a lot on their minds, right. And that's fine. And they should be doing all kinds of things and not only being studious in college. But I think we tend to just kind of set the students on a path and say, this is where you're going and you need to get from point A to point B to point C. I think it wouldn't hurt if our colleges paused a little bit, maybe at the beginning of the college career or halfway through it or whatever. I don't think we should wait till the end when it's all over. And make it possible for students to have dialogue with each other and with faculty about why they're there and what will they look back on and feel good about when it's all over. Students may think that what they want is nothing but high grades and easy courses, but the truth is, when they look back 5 years later, if that's all they've got out of college, they won't feel that it was a very good investment of their time and resources.
My own favorite passage in the book is where you talk about a meeting of Columbia University alumni with whom you're speaking, and one of the alums says to you, the important thing to me about my college education is that it helped me enjoy life. This was an aha moment for me. Would you like to comment a little bit about that?
It was a great moment. I had made the economic argument for the value of liberal education, and I had made the citizenship argument for the importance of democracy, and I believe in those arguments. Right. But I stopped prematurely, and this alum, who was not shy, stood up and said, look, that was all fine and interesting, but you missed the main point. Mm-hmm. The main point is that college enabled me to enjoy life. And what he meant by that is that it had just opened up his mind to possibilities that he had never dreamt of. Right. And he became a more interesting person to other people and to himself. Right. As a result. I thought it was a great answer, and I wish I could take him with me on the on the book tour. Right.
Okay, well, this was Professor Andrew Delbanco of Columbia University talking about his new book, College, What It Was, Is, and Should Be, published by Princeton University Press.